I don't know when I stopped being someone they notified. The group chat was still there, still titled family, still led by Janet's contact photo, chin high, pearl earrings, soft filter. I hadn't muted it. I never left it. Some part of me must have thought that staying in was the same as still belonging. The first image loaded slowly, too slowly for what it was. Blurry at first, then sharpened into rows of familiar faces in front of my parents' porch. Gerald was holding a tray of lemon bars. Aunt Laurie had her hand on Ryan's back, and Ryan, smiling wide, was holding up a key fob like it was a prize. Behind him, unmistakable, even in the shallow depth of the photo, was the Highlander. I remember the sound I made, quiet, short, almost like biting down on the wrong part of a utensil. There were more pictures, one of the cake unevenly frosted with "Here's to new beginnings" written in crooked cursive. One of Ryan sitting in the driver's seat, waving like a pageant winner. One of Janet's hands clasped at her chest, looking toward the car like it was a baptism. No caption explained the occasion, but it didn't need one. I tapped once, then again. There were 17 messages, none addressed to me. Further down, he found it. Ryan's new start is important. You can understand that, right? It was nestled between a photo of him hugging Gerald and a sticker of clapping hands. I didn't scroll anymore. I didn't type anything. I just stared at those 10 words as if they... A notification buzzed in from the DMV's online portal, one I'd set up years ago after registering the vehicle jointly with Caleb. "Your request has been processed," it read. "Title updated, sole owner Ryan Hale." I hadn't filed any request. I hadn't signed anything. But the title was gone. Just like the car. Just like the seat at the table I hadn't realized had been pulled out from under me. The inside of my wrist itched, a reflex from years in uniform. I rubbed it against my knee, then looked down at the faded navy t-shirt I'd thrown on that morning. The logo from Pendleton's farewell ceremony had already cracked. I hadn't had time to wash it. It still smelled faintly of the pine trees lining the barracks and the plastic chair I'd sat in during the speech about transition and triumph. I remember clapping along, even smiling, thinking about how I'd drive the Highlander home afterward. The one Caleb's parents gave us on our wedding day. Paid off, clean title. A symbolic offering for a new chapter. The next chapter, it turns out, was being written without me. Janet didn't call. Gerald didn't text. Ryan certainly didn't explain. There was only the photo, the cake, the comment. You can understand that, right? I sat with that line for a long time. I thought about the last time I saw Ryan in person. He'd asked if I still drove that boring family car, and I'd told him it wasn't about flash, it was about reliability. He'd laughed. "You always pick things that don't break." Then he looked at me and added, "Must be nice to have that luxury. There's no real response to that. Not in the moment." I remember the ring on my finger. It felt heavier that day. The one Caleb gave me before his deployment. I never took it off, even after the divorce. Not because of him, but because of what I became while wearing it. Steady, unapologetic, brief. Ryan never saw that version of me. Gerald never looked long enough. Janet preferred the quiet outline of a daughter, one who could be repositioned in family photo like a decorative frame. I clicked out of the message, opened the DMV portal again, downloaded the PDF of the new title. My name was no longer there, no strike-through, just absence, as if it had never belonged. There was a time I would have called to clarify, a time I would have asked, did something get misfiled, or was there a mistake? But this wasn't clerical, it was intentional. The kind of choice made in a living room over lukewarm coffee and assumptions. The kind that ends with cake. The radiator hissed behind me. I hadn't realized the heat had kicked on. I pulled my legs up the couch, creaking beneath me, and leaned back. The sun had started to stretch across the floor in stripes. I didn't chase it. In the kitchen, a stack of envelopes waited to be recycled. One of them was from Janet, postmarked last week. I hadn't opened it. I knew her handwriting too well. The looped F in Florence always looked like it was trying not to cry. The envelope was thin. Probably a card. Maybe a note about family, about understanding. Maybe another version of Ryan's new start. The kind of start built from other people's endings. I didn't open it. I thought about the parking spot outside my apartment. Still empty. Still waiting. Just like I had been. Janet had said once when I was 16, "You don't need much to feel secure, Florence. That's one of your strengths." I remember thinking it was a compliment. Maybe it was. Or maybe it was permission to give me less. In boot camp, they taught us to sleep in 12-minute increments, to carry everything we needed in 3 compartments, to walk without sound. I mastered that quickly. Not because I had to, but because I already knew how to take up less room. I looked at my phone again. No new messages, no corrections, no apologies. The photo stayed pinned in the group chat for 2 days. Then it was replaced by a casserole recipe and a blurry picture of someone's dog. No one noticed I hadn't replied. No one mentioned my name, and I left the group chat that night. Quietly. No goodbye. No notice. I scrolled to leave conversation and tapped. It didn't ask for a reason, and I didn't offer one. I used to think being easy to manage was the same as being loved. When we were little, Ryan cried until he got the bigger room. I gave up mine without making a sound. The ceiling fan in the smaller room wobbled and clicked through the night, but I learned to sleep with a pillow over my head. Janet called it maturity. Gerald called it knowing when to let things go. They said I was the sturdy one. I remember that word clearly. It showed up in birthday cards and side comments, at family dinners in the way my name was said after everyone else's. She's steady, that one. Like a table leg, like a backup plan. Ryan once got a ribbon for most improved in 8th grade science. It was framed, hung in the hallway. When I graduated top of my class in basic, Janet kept the certificate in a drawer until she found a frame that matched the others. She never did. I didn't press. I brought flowers home on holiday. I helped hang lights when Ryan said he was too busy. I cleaned gutters. I fixed the bathroom faucet after Gerald cracked it with his toolbox, trying to do it himself. There was a slow drip for 3 weeks. I sealed it in under 15 minutes, wiped the sink, and didn't mention it again. Janet patted my shoulder as I was packing up my kit. "You're just one of those people who shows up when it counts. Quiet, but essential." I remember the tone more than the words. It had the soft finality of someone praising the coffee pot for not breaking. I texted her once from the base hospital, asking how her blood pressure was. She replied 2 hours later, "Thanks for checking." All good. The next day I saw a Facebook post of Ryan standing beside her hospital bed, arm around her shoulders. Caption: "So grateful for my son, always there when I need him." I didn't comment. I clicked the little heart icon and closed the app. Gerald used to introduce me to neighbors as our daughter the Marine. Sometimes he added first one in the family, like it was a fun fact on a game show. He never came to my swearing in, said the flights were too expensive and the timing wasn't ideal. Ryan threw a graduation party the same week. I watched the photos from base streamers, cupcakes, 20 people in the backyard. My name wasn't mentioned once. Janet mailed me a care package the following month. Inside were some peanut butter crackers, a keychain that said, Semper Fi, and a note in block handwriting. Make us proud, Florence. I kept the keychain even though I didn't carry keys back then. When I was home on leave, I offered to help clear out the garage. Ryan had left 3 broken chairs and a box of cords labelled important. I hauled everything to the dump, reorganized the shelves labelled every drawer. Gerald walked in afterward, looked around and said, Guess Ryan finally got around to this. Huh? I didn't correct him. At Christmas, I gave Janet a silk scarf I'd picked out from a small shop overseas, hand-woven deep green, the exact shade of the couch she always said was too dull to decorate. She opened it politely, folded it once, and set it beside a gift card Ryan had given her. Starbucks, she said. He knows me too well. I watched her drape the scarf over a dining chair later, where it stayed for the rest of the evening untouched. The chair had a grease mark from Gerald's tools. I didn't mention it. When I brought home my first official promotion letter, I left it on the kitchen counter with the edge tucked under the fruit bowl. Janet moved it to the side so she could wipe down the counter. She didn't read it. Gerald walked past it twice. Ryan used it as a coaster for his iced tea. At dinner, I offered to say grace. Janet blinked. Oh, sweetie, we already prayed. Ryan covered it. No one looked up when I sat down. Later that night, I took a walk around the block in the cold. I wasn't dressed for it. I didn't bring gloves. My hands went numb around the edges, and I focused on the sound of my shoes scraping the sidewalk. Even that felt too loud. The next morning, I fixed the porch light before heading back to base. It had flickered for 6 months. When Janet called later to thank me, her voice was rushed. Ryan said you were heading out early. We didn't want to bother you too much. You know how independent you are. I didn't answer right away. She filled the silence. It's just, you never need much, do you? That question sat there bare and whole. I almost replied. I almost reminded her that needing less doesn't mean wanting nothing. That being reliable, there isn't the same as being disposable. But I just said, have a good week. She didn't notice the pause. I once left a small package for Ryan on his birthday. A field journal with embossed initials and a pen I'd ordered from overseas. He never mentioned it. Weeks later, I saw it in the back seat of his car, unopened under a pile of fast food wrappers. Janet once told me over coffee, he's just not wired like you. He's softer, needs more direction. I looked at the rim of her mug, a faint lipstick stain. The color was unfamiliar. I'd given her a shade like that once. She never wore it. Florence, you're strong. That's why we don't worry about you. That was meant to be comforting. I nodded like it was. I used to think that fitting in meant not needing too much space, that if I folded myself neatly enough, they'd see me. That service was the same as belonging, but I've learned that being dependable is a quiet way to disappear, and that people rarely thank the furniture for holding the weight. Some things shouldn't need to be said, but silence when stretched too thin becomes a kind of shape, one you learn to carry. And I carried it well. Too well. Sometimes it wasn't what they said. It was what they skipped. There was a ceremony after my second deployment. Modest, nothing formal, just a quiet afternoon in a multi-purpose room with old folding chairs and the scent of burnt coffee drifting from a plastic urn in the corner. I'd sent the invitation weeks before. No RSVP came. Harper showed up anyway. She didn't speak much, just sat in the second row in a jacket 2 sizes too big and clapped at the right moments. I didn't ask how she knew to come. I didn't ask why she stayed. Afterward, she handed me a paper cup of lemonade and muttered something about how they probably got the date wrong. I didn't correct her. There was a leftover slice of cake with my name piped across it in uneven icing. The E trailed off the edge. When I got home later that month, Janet was planning a small lunch with friends. She asked me to help set the table. The napkins were printed with little blue flowers. I folded them into triangles and placed one at each plate. Gerald was leaning against the counter, arms crossed. "Ryan's coming," Janet said, almost as an afterthought. I nodded. "He's doing well," Gerald added. "Started that coffee thing, says he wants to build a brand." The silverware clinked louder than I intended when I set it down. "He's really taking a risk," Janet continued. "That kind of courage, it's not something you can teach." I didn't say anything. I adjusted a knife that was slightly askew and folded my hands. During the meal, someone asked Janet what she was most proud of recently. She smiled into her wine glass. "Watching my son take initiative," she said. "He's really stepped into himself." There was a pause. Gerald nodded slowly. "He's always had potential." They moved on to other things. No one looked at me. The photos from that lunch ended up on social media. Ryan's plate of avocado toast got more likes than the local news article that had run a week earlier with my name in the headline. I didn't share the article. It didn't seem to fit anywhere. On my 35th birthday, a card came in the mail. It was store-bought, unsealed. Inside was a generic printed message, no note, no signature. Just a gold-embossed wishing you all the best. The envelope had no return address. I placed it on the kitchen counter and left it there for 2 days. Then I slid it into the drawer with the appliance manuals and expired coupons. The year before Ryan's birthday party had a rented photo booth and a catered dessert table. I helped clean up afterward. Janet thanked me as I wiped frosting off a chair. "You've always been good at pitching in," she said. "Never needed the spotlight." That was true. There's a picture in the living room of my parents' house. The frame is heavy, gold-rimmed, polished once a year before Thanksgiving. In it, the family is standing in the backyard, arms wrapped around each other, eyes squinting into sunlight. The crop of the photo cuts off at my elbow. I'd been standing slightly to the side holding a tray of lemonade that didn't make the frame. Janet once told a guest while gesturing to that photo, "That's our family. Every one of us." I stood beside her holding a dish towel. Harper leaned in once during a Christmas gathering and whispered, "You know, you're not in the photo, right?" I nodded. "They say it was the best one." She blinked, then looked away. "It probably was. When I brought a small gift to Janet last Mother's Day, a necklace, simple, not expensive, just something I thought she'd wear, she opened it and smiled with her lips. "It's nice," she said, then turned to Gerald. "Ryan got me a spa package. He knows I've been stressed." I folded the tissue paper back into the gift box and placed it on the table beside her wine glass. There was a watermark on the glass, a faint ring already fading. Once, when I was 10, I won a spelling bee. Ryan had stayed home sick that day. When I showed Janet the ribbon, she looked up from her crossword and asked if I remembered to bring the permission slip for field day. I had. It was folded in the front pocket of my backpack, still damp from the juice box that had leaked on the way home. She signed it with the same pen she used for grocery lists. I found that ribbon in a box last spring, creased in the middle. The paper backing had yellowed. I didn't remember keeping it, but I hadn't thrown it away either. At Thanksgiving 2 years ago, someone brought up achievements over dinner. Janet laughed softly and tapped her glass. "Ryan's been so brave," she said. "He's reinventing himself." Gerald looked down the table at me and nodded once. "And Florence," he added, "has always been steady. No elaboration, no example, Just that word again, as if it explained enough. Later that night, as I was putting dishes into the dishwasher, I found a handwritten note from Janet taped to the fridge. Don't forget to grab the pie from the garage. No greeting, no thank you, no name. That night I stared at the note longer than I meant to. The tape had started to peel at the edge. Ryan posted a photo from the same dinner. Caption: "Family means everything." In the photo, his arm was around Janet. Gerald was smiling at something off camera. I was in the background, half-turned, holding a plate. I didn't comment. I didn't save the image. There was no need to collect what was never meant to include me. Some things aren't taken away. They're just not offered. The email arrived at 2:11 p.m. I'd been on hold with the insurance company, balancing a chipped ceramic mug in one hand and a pen in the other. The mug had a faded logo from a base I hadn't been to in years. The pen had teeth marks I didn't remember making. The subject line was short, "Title transfer confirmed." I opened it out of habit, expecting some automated notice or clerical note. Instead, I saw the V-in of the Highlander, and underneath it, a line I read 3 times registered owner Ryan Hale. There was a signature block, a digital timestamp, a PDF link. My name wasn't anywhere. I placed the mug on the floor, not the table. I don't know why. The insurance rep finally came on the line. I ended the call without saying anything. My phone buzzed again with a satisfaction survey. I forwarded the email to Eleanor, then sat very still. The Highlander wasn't just a vehicle, but I didn't need to explain that to anyone, at least not out loud. Later that afternoon, Eleanor called me back. Her voice was clean-clipped, used to precision. She didn't ask what happened. She just listed facts. The document had a forged e-signature. The filing came from Gerald's IP address. The process had been finalized through a notary service tied to a family correction form, whatever that meant. She ended the call with, "I'll take care of it." I didn't reply. I just nodded, though no one could see. Janet answered on the second ring. "Florence, sweetheart," she said, like I'd called about weather. I paused. I could hear dishes in the background, the soft click of silverware being sorted. "There's no need to get worked up," she continued. "Ryan needed something I didn't speak." She shifted tone, softened it the way she always did when trying to ease herself through a corner. "You're the one who doesn't need much, and really, that car, it wasn't doing you any favors." I heard the dishwasher door shut. "You know, I didn't mean anything by it. Let's not dig up old tension. It's just a car." The next silence lasted longer. Then she added, "You've never been materialistic. Don't start now." I hung up without saying goodbye. Gerald called 20 minutes later. No greeting. "This is all getting too dramatic," he said. "I handled the paperwork because it was simpler. You weren't using it much anyway." I looked down at the DMV email still open on my screen. The words felt clinical, detached. Like paperwork always does. It's not like it was some sentimental object, he said. "You need to stop clinging to these things. That's not who you are." There was a long pause. He added, "You're better than that." That one stayed with me. Not for what it meant, but for what it avoided. Better than what? Than asking questions, than being surprised something of mine could be handed away. I didn't tell him about the folder I'd kept in my drawer, the one with the original title, the gift letter, the photo of Caleb's parents handing us the keys with quiet pride. I didn't tell him that I'd checked the glove compartment once and found a note I'd left myself after our first road trip. "Keep going," written in faded blue ink on a diner receipt. None of that mattered now. they had decided it didn't. I opened the glove box in my mind and imagined it empty. There had been a time when I would have tried to explain, when I would have asked if they remembered who filed the paperwork, if they thought I hadn't noticed, if they believed the absence of a confrontation meant consent. But I didn't ask. Not this time. I deleted the call logs from both of them, not as a gesture, just as cleanup. A friend once told me that theft isn't always about possession. Sometimes it's about rewriting the story so you were never in it to begin with. I hadn't understood what she meant. Until now. I reread the line from Janet's voicemail, "Let's not dig up old tension." She meant, don't bring up what we've already chosen to forget. The next morning, the envelope from DMV arrived. White, sealed, my name on the front still printed by the system, still addressed like I mattered. Inside the formal confirmation of transfer, one sheet of paper, thick-stocked and neat. No mention of revocation, no apology. Just a line near the bottom that said, previous owner, Florence Hale, removed. Removed, not sold by, not transferred with consent. Just that word. Quiet and clinical. I placed it under the fridge magnet, shaped like a pineapple. A tourist gift from a beach trip I hadn't joined. The magnet tilted slightly under the weight. I stood there for a long time. It wasn't about the car. It never was. It was about the signature they didn't ask me for. The name they deleted without telling me. The decision made on my behalf and handed off like a sweater no longer worn. Ryan posted a photo later that day. Him in the driveway, leaning against the Highlander. Caption, moving forward. 37 likes. One from Janet, one from Gerald. A comment from Aunt Laurie, proud of you, Rye. I didn't screenshot it. I didn't report it. I just closed the app. Some thefts don't take keys or cash. They take space, meaning, presence. And when it happens quietly enough, people don't notice the absence. But I did. And I remembered. Some exits don't require doors, just the absence of noise. I typed the subject line twice before sending it. Thank you for the clarification. No body text, no signature, just those 6 words. I didn't expect a reply. I wasn't looking for one. I logged out of the family group chat that afternoon. No announcement, no farewell. The little bubble with my name simply disappeared between a forwarded video of Ryan's food truck launch and a meme about strong women who don't complain. I closed the app without checking if anyone noticed. Later, I opened my drawer and took out the old calendar I used to keep in my work bag. It had a red circle on the 3rd Tuesday of April, Ryan's title transfer day. Nothing was marked for my discharge ceremony. Just blank lines. I placed it in the shredder slowly, 1 page at a time. January sounded louder than the rest. The keychain was still on the hook behind my door. It held 2 keys, one to the house on Brookstone Lane, and one to the side gate I had fixed the summer after Caleb died. I wrapped them in a cloth napkin navy blue frayed at the corner and mailed them without a return address. I didn't write a note. I didn't owe one. When the confirmation email came from USPS, I archived it. Janet used to say, "This will always be your home." But the last time I went into that room, the mattress was gone. The bed frame had been taken apart and leaned against the wall. The closet held old blankets and 3 folding chairs. I opened the bottom drawer of the dresser and found a pack of light bulbs and 2 rolls of duct tape. There wasn't space for a person anymore, just utility. Janet had poked her head in that day and smiled. We didn't think you'd mind. You travel so much." I hadn't replied. I folded the last of my uniforms and slid them into a tote bag without looking at her. There had been a time in the Corps when silence meant discipline. A retreat wasn't weakness, it was strategy. We didn't fight to prove ourselves right. We maneuvered to survive, to last. I remembered that now. Unfollowing them all was methodical. Gerald, Janet, Ryan, the church friend who always tagged me in verses I didn't believe she read. It took under 7 minutes. The screen felt lighter when I finished. Not clean, just quieter. The only thing I kept was a photo of Caleb cropped to remove the background. He wore the tie I'd given him for our anniversary, the one with a tiny chip in the fabric near the knot. I had chosen it for the imperfection. I kept it for the same reason. I found the wedding album in the back of the hallway closet. Dusty. Unbothered. I didn't flip through it. I just pulled out the single loose photo, the one of the car ribbon being cut. I slipped it into an envelope and placed it at the bottom of the donation bin. In the corner of the attic behind a stack of old paint cans, I saw the cardboard box with my name written in faded Sharpie. Inside a trophy from high school, 2 postcards I'd mailed from Okinawa, and a worn copy of Leaves of Grass with a cracked spine. Underneath a birthday card. No envelope. Just the words, "Enjoy the day." Us. I didn't need to know who us was. I folded the card once and put it in my coat pocket. Not to keep. Just to hold, briefly. Gerald used to quote parables. He had a favourite, "Don't cast pearls before swine." He liked to offer it when someone declined his advice, or asked too many questions. He'd once told me, "You give too much meaning to things, that's why they disappoint you." I hadn't known what to say then. I do now. The SUV was gone, the house key returned, the room dismantled, the name removed from their conversations, all done gently, without shouting, without bruises. Just like a soft wind, erasing footprints. Florence, the one who fixed the faucet. The one who always showed up for Thanksgiving. The one who sent thank you notes even when no one replied. That version of me had been useful, predictable. Now she was quiet. They wouldn't notice the change, just the absence. At the bottom of my sock drawer was a small tin I hadn't opened in years. It held 4 coins from different countries, a button from Caleb's suit jacket, and a piece of ribbon from my boot camp graduation. I looked at them for a long time. None of them had monetary value. I closed the tin and placed it back where it was. Some things I wasn't ready to give away. Not yet. There are kinds of silence that ache and others that seal. This one didn't ache. It simply meant I was done being edited out while standing in the room. I hadn't left the battlefield. I had stopped calling it mine. I used to count how many steps it took from the front gate to the porch, 62 if I didn't rush. I stopped counting here. The new place came with a crooked towel rack and a single electric burner. The closet doors didn't quite close, and the walls bore the ghosts of someone else's framed memories. I scrubbed them anyway, not to erase, just to start from 0. I left the windows open longer than needed. The air smelled like lake water and fallen leaves. Someone below played the same 2 jazz records on repeat. I didn't mind. The brass reminded me of drills before dawn. That half hour before orders arrived when everyone stood quietly tying their boots. I drank instant coffee that first morning, out of a chipped mug with no handle. It burned my fingertips, but I held it anyway. The box marked Office for Charge Deployment had stayed sealed for 3 years. I opened it slowly, cutting through the tape with my old dog tag. inside the unit map from Al-Assad, 4 ribbons, 3 letters on yellowed paper, and the pin from my last command roll. I laid them out on the table, wiped each frame with the edge of my shirt sleeve, and began to hang them straight, deliberate centered. Janet once ran her hand across one of the frames at the old house. "It's too heavy, honey. People want to feel relaxed in a living room." She didn't mean the frame. Here I placed them exactly where I wanted. I returned Eleanor's call just after noon. Her voice hadn't changed, still clipped, still warm under the surface like an engine left running. She didn't ask why I waited, just confirmed the paperwork would be drafted by Friday. Her final words: "You still have jurisdiction, Florence. They signed it away, not you." I didn't need the car. That wasn't the point. The grocery bag on the counter held only 4 things: oats, tea, a lemon, and a notebook. I didn't write in it right away. Just opened to the middle page and ran my hand over the lines. At some point, I wrote, "For the first time in years, I don't have to pretend to be visible." No signature, no date. A voicemail came in from Ryan later that week. I didn't listen to it. The preview line on my phone read, "Hey Flo, didn't want things to..." I deleted it before the ellipsis resolved. I set my phone face down. The bed didn't have a headboard, just a firm mattress and a single grey blanket. The sheet corners didn't quite stay tucked, but I folded them again each morning anyway. I missed structure. Not orders, just rhythm. There was a time when Caleb and I would take turns making the bed, always pulling from opposite ends, wordless. Now I made it alone, but with the same corners first. I saw my name on the mailbox for the first time. Only mine. Not a hyphen, not a shared initial, just Florence Hale. No corrections, no extra parentheses. I ran my thumb over it like it might smudge. It didn't. The day I dropped off the legal paperwork at the notary's office, the woman behind the desk looked over my ID, looked at me, then looked again. "You were in the Marines?" I nodded. "My niece just joined. She says the women don't quit." No reply came out of me, but something behind my ribs held still for a moment. That evening, I pulled my old uniform jacket from the closet and hung it behind the door. Not to wear, just to remember that once there was structure. There was saluting, but there was also trust. The silence in the apartment was wide, but it didn't echo. I reheated tea that had gone cold. Twice, each time forgetting it on the burner while organizing drawers. I found 3 pens all out of ink and kept them anyway. They had weight. The hallway smelled of cinnamon from a neighbor's kitchen. I didn't knock, but I stood there a moment, remembering the smell of Janet's pies. Only hers never had cinnamon. Always almond. Always just a little off. A letter arrived from the DMV a week later. The ownership correction was approved. I didn't call to share the news. No one had asked if I'd kept the spare key. I walked around the block twice that night. No destination. Just a need to confirm my steps were still mine. The photo of Caleb stayed in my drawer. I hadn't found a place for it yet. Maybe I didn't need to. Maybe it had always been meant to stay close, but unseen. When I finally wrote another entry, I pressed harder with the pen. The ink bled slightly at the curves. Silence is not a pause. It's a decision. I folded the page once before closing the notebook. There was a voicemail from Gerald the next day. I didn't delete it. I just let it sit. The file name read unknown number. That felt accurate. I didn't answer the knock at the door that night. Whoever it was left quickly. No note. No repeat knock. I waited until morning to check the peephole. No one. The rug I bought for the living space was thin and frayed on one side. It curled at the corners no matter how many times I pressed it down. Still, I kept pressing. not to fix it, just to know I could. Some things don't rot right away. They keep their shape long after they've gone hollow. I let the phone ring twice before turning it face down on the counter. Janet's name had appeared without a photo. The old contact image, her smiling at some lake house barbecue, was gone. I didn't answer, but I didn't block it either. The voicemail transcribed itself slowly. The first line read, "I've been thinking about you, honey." The second, Ryan's a little overwhelmed with all the legal stuff, and it's causing stress for us too. I didn't play the full message. The tone was too even, too round-edged. There's a difference between someone missing you and someone missing the way you used to make things easier for them. I poured water into the kettle and watched it gather steam. The handle of my mug had a small crack now. I traced it with my thumb and didn't press. An hour later, a photo arrived from Harper. No message, just an image of me in uniform one I hadn't seen in years. The same stance they once asked me to crop out of the family slideshow because it looked too formal. Now it was posted in a new group chat. Family means everything. I wasn't in the group. Harper followed up. "I thought you should know. They're using your picture again. You're not forgotten, you're just easier to frame than to invite." I didn't reply, but I stared at that message longer than I meant to. The front door creaked from the wind. I stood and secured the latch slower than usual. Not out of caution, just to feel the weight of something under my hand. Later that evening, Ryan's name lit up. A message this time. "Let's not blow this up. If you cancel the claim, I'll bring the car back. No drama. Just clean and simple. No punctuation at the end." I didn't respond. I put the phone in the drawer under the sink, the same drawer where I kept receipts, expired coupons, and the pen that only worked if you shook it. There was nothing clean or simple about being erased by degree. When I left the military, I signed a dozen forms, some on paper, some digital. Each one required confirmation of identity, a thumbprint, a second check. Here all it took was a quiet click from someone else's desk. Janet used to tell me, "You'll always have a place here. Your room will never change," but when I opened that door the last time, the mattress was gone, and the frame held bins of wool blankets labeled guest closet. They hadn't replaced me, just used the space. Harper once offered to visit my place. I told her the elevator wasn't working. She said, "Oh, that's all right then. I wouldn't want to make you feel like you had to clean up." I hadn't said anything about cleaning. People say a lot more in what they choose not to notice. The email from the legal office came in the next morning. The filing had been processed. The vehicle would be returned to my name within 5 business days. No further action required unless I wanted to pursue forgery charges. I closed the tab. There was a knock on the apartment door that afternoon. I didn't answer. A flyer slipped under the frame a few seconds later. It was for a veterans' breakfast at the community center. I folded it once and placed it beneath the old teapot. The voice in the back of my mind. Caleb's voice, not mine. Sometimes said, "You know they'll call when they're stuck. They always call when they're stuck." And they had, but this time I hadn't picked up. Janet's last line in the voicemail hovered in my memory like the smell of overripe fruit. "Don't let this small thing ruin the peace in the family." Peace, apparently, was the burden of the person who noticed the break in it. I left the dishes drying by the sink and stepped outside. The air was sharp. Somewhere someone was burning wood. Not enough to see smoke, but enough to scratch the back of the throat. I remembered a training exercise in winter when we were told to dig our own trenches through frozen dirt. No one complained. We just knew the cold was coming and it was ours to face or retreat from. I didn't dig the deepest trench, but I stayed the longest in it. That mattered back then. The group photo from the family chat stayed open in the background of my phone. I noticed things most people wouldn't. My name wasn't in the caption, but they'd tagged Ryan Harper, even second cousins I barely remembered. I zoomed in. In the corner of the photo, someone had cropped out the old Marine Corps flag I used to hang in the hallway. I closed the image. When Caleb was alive, he used to tell me I carried too much in silence, that not saying things didn't mean they went unnoticed. But I've learned that silence isn't the absence of action, it's the refusal to perform. I sat down with my notebook. Not the one I used for bills or errands, the other one, the one with the stiff spine and unlined pages. I wrote one sentence. They remembered me when they needed a steady hand, but not when they passed the rope. No one would see it. That was the point. The wind picked up outside. A branch tapped against the window. I let it. Inside the light dimmed. I didn't reach for the lamp. I just watched the shadows move. The phone buzzed again, once then twice. I didn't look. Whatever it wasn't for me. Not really. And I didn't owe them the courtesy of pretending otherwise. There's a difference between cutting things off and letting them fall away. I changed the license plate by myself. The screws were rusted tight, and the wrench kept slipping in my hand. It wasn't a fast job. I didn't rush it. The old plate had my father's initials in the bottom corner, small stamped letters. He once insisted made things easier to track. I placed it face down in the glove box and left it there. Not to keep. Just not ready to throw it out. The new plate looked plain. No symbols. Just numbers and letters I didn't associate with anyone else. That was the point. At the animal shelter, no one asked where I used to work. No one cared what I could command or organize or survive. I mopped floors, stocked food, walked dogs that barked too loud or not at all. They gave me a name tag that just read Florence. Nothing more. I kept it in my back pocket, even after my shift, like a small reminder that I could exist without a prefix. The first few weeks I bought the same groceries I always had out of habit, not preference. Canned tuna, brown rice, a jar of almond butter I never touched. Then one morning I walked past the produce section and picked up plums. No one I knew ever liked them. I bought 4. That night I ate one with a spoon. It wasn't good, but I finished it. At home I cleared out the drawers. Old statements, login slips, passwords scrawled in my mother's handwriting, tucked into envelopes marked important. I typed each account fresh. New usernames, no shared hints, no recovery options that led back to them. The passwords were simple, just the kind of words no one would guess because no one else knew what they meant. The name of the dog from my first deployment. The number printed on the inside flap of my old duffel. The phrase Eleanor used when I handed her the letter for Ryan. This isn't spite, this is clean air. When the civil no-contact notice was finalized, I didn't read it twice. I just folded it along the crease and tucked it into the file cabinet under private. Not family. I got a text from Janet a few days later, a photo of a birthday cake with blue frosting. Just thinking of you. Hope you're still the same girl who used to love blue velvet. There was no question mark, no apology, just the tone of someone who remembered how you used to be convenient. I deleted it without archiving. The phone didn't ring after. The kitchen scissors dulled over time. I used them anyway. I trimmed my hair over the sink shorter each time. The pieces fell quietly onto the ceramic and stayed there until I swept them into a paper towel. Not out of ceremony. Just to be sure I didn't leave traces where none belonged. At the shelter, one of the volunteers. Dana, maybe Denise offered me a ride once when it started to rain. Where's home for you, Flo? I shrugged. Nowhere I have to explain. She laughed like I'd told a joke. I didn't correct her. On the 1st of the month, I went to the bank in person and updated my beneficiary forms. The clerk was young, careful with a voice that sounded like she still rehearsed it. She asked if I wanted to add a secondary contact. I said no. The line on the form stayed blank. At home, I looked through the small tin box where I kept documents. A single photograph of Caleb was still inside. Not from our wedding, not in uniform. Just him holding a pair of boots by the laces standing at the edge of the water. His expression wasn't readable. I kept it in the box and didn't add a caption. There were no more group chats, no invitations, no forwarded memes from Harper. The silence stretched out like a hallway no one walked down anymore. I didn't check the peephole. I didn't keep the porch light on. The vet at the shelter once told me the trick with stray animals was to wait. They come around when they know you're not going to call them by the wrong name. I thought about that while tying my shoes one morning. The laces had frayed. I replaced them with mismatched ones from an old pair of boots. I didn't tell anyone. That afternoon I passed a window downtown and saw my reflection. Not younger, not stronger, just whole. Not waiting to be asked back in. I hadn't realized how much energy I'd spent pretending I still belonged somewhere I'd been quietly erased from. The next day I filed for a P.O. box. Small, no extras, just a number on a wall I could access with a key only I held. I didn't send the address to anyone. A letter came from Eleanor. Just a typed note. It's done. Let me know if you need anything else. There was no logo on the envelope. No signature flourish. Just a clean line. I burned it in a shallow dish on the balcony. The ashes curled like something folding inward. No smoke alarm went off. I looked out over the parking lot and counted 4 birds on the power line. None of them moved when a car started below. Still quiet, self-contained. I didn't wave. I didn't take a picture. I just stayed there breathing. Not better, but mine. There's a kind of relief that doesn't feel good, only necessary. I folded the documents along the seams until they lay flat like something ironed out, just to fit inside a quiet envelope. No card. No flourish. Just the facts, a copy of the new title in my name, alone the formal withdrawal from the family trust, the line I had underlined only once. There is no remaining obligation between us. I pressed the edges of the envelope shut without licking it. The adhesive didn't hold well, so I added a strip of tape. Clear, thin, efficient. The last time I used that return address it was to mail my father a copy of my deployment orders. He hadn't responded then, either, just told Janet to call and ask why I'd listed them under emergency contact. I removed that too. No more fallback names. If something happened to me now, no one would be summoned unless I asked for them. The paper felt heavier than it should have, like it carried the weight of things I no longer wanted returned. I slid the envelope into the blue box at the corner of Westland and Ashbury, then walked back without looking over my shoulder. The wind kicked up a receipt from someone else's fast food bag. I stepped over it. At home, I pulled the storage bin from beneath the bed. The plastic cracked faintly under pressure, brittle from age. Inside, medals in velvet sleeves, commendations, folded flags, hand-typed letters from soldiers long reassigned or buried. I didn't read them again. I'd already memorized what mattered. Not the words, but the shapes they left. I found the small brass pin they'd given me during my final promotion ceremony. It had tarnished around the edges, but the lettering still showed through. I wiped it once with the hem of my shirt, then placed it inside the folded uniform jacket. The sleeves still smelled faintly of starch and dust. Oiled the box with a single strip of brown tape. On the lid I wrote in permanent marker, "This is my past. I no longer live inside it. I didn't store it high or far, just out of sight." Close enough to acknowledge, distant enough to choose. Later that week, a voicemail came through. "You're going too far. This isn't what family does. I'm still your mother." I let it play out. The pauses between sentences felt longer than the sentences themselves. At the end, there was the soft sound of her setting the phone down. Not a click, just absence. I deleted the message. No reply felt more final than a reply ever could. Aunt Laurie emailed the next morning. A mass forward with a subject line, "Legacy video full draft attached." I opened it out later. Harper sent a 2-word text I saw. No context, no judgment, just presence. I didn't write back. At the DMV, I had crossed out the hyphenated version of my last name they still had on file. "You're changing your legal name again?" the clerk had asked. I nodded. She hadn't looked up again until it was done. My license arrived in the mail 2 weeks later. Just my first and middle. No suffix, no inherited trail. It felt strange to carry it, not like identity, more like space. I thought about burning the old cards. In the end, I shredded them slowly, piece by piece, into a brown paper bag. The act wasn't theatrical. It was maintenance, like watering a plant or sweeping the entryway. One by one, I removed their names from online forms, outdated records, default settings. Each click felt small, each one necessary. I received a registered letter from the family estate attorney, most likely prompted by the documents I'd mailed. I didn't open it. I dropped it in the same bin where I placed outdated user manuals and furniture instructions I'd never needed. It didn't feel like rebellion. It felt like discernment. At the animal shelter, I spent that Friday washing bedding. One of the cats, a grey one, with a crooked ear, crawled into the basket while I worked. He didn't move when I lifted the last towel, just stood with the kind of calm that comes from having nothing left to defend. A volunteer passed behind me and commented that one doesn't like being touched, only comes close when he's decided. I nodded. I didn't reach for him. The smell of detergent stayed on my hands even after I left. That night, I made tea and let it steep longer than I usually did. The bag unraveled slightly, leaving small flecks in the cup. I didn't strain them out. I found the ring my mother had given me when I turned 25, meant to be a symbol of legacy. I slid it into a drawer with expired coupons and loose change. It didn't belong to any particular place anymore. Not on my hand. Not in memory. I reread the letter I'd mailed and didn't change a word. The quiet that followed wasn't sudden. It had been building, like light seeping in around a sealed window. I didn't open that window. I just sat with the stillness. Some things don't need witnesses to be real. I poured the water slowly, letting it pass over the leaves in a quiet spiral. The mug had a chip near the handle one I'd stopped noticing. I set it down beside the small plate, 2 slices of toast, not yet buttered, and unfolded the letter that had arrived the day before. The logo was printed in pale green ink at the top, the animal rescue shelter. Not official in any grand way, but something steady, familiar. They'd asked if I'd be open to training new volunteers this summer. A paragraph or 2 soft in tone. I read it once more, then placed it flat under the mug to keep it from curling at the edges. The window was open. Light came in without effort. It didn't flood the room, it settled. On the counter, a tea towel hung crooked, half tucked into the drawer. I didn't fix it. My phone was face down, silent. I hadn't charged it overnight. No missed calls, no calendar reminders, just the room and the air and the soft hum from the radiator. There was a time I would have forwarded the letter to someone, anyone, proof of usefulness, of being seen. But the chair across from me was empty, and that felt right. I reached for the notebook. The spine had bent from use, and the pages had started to feather at the corners. I wrote, without decoration. Silence is not a gap. It is where I finally hear myself. No signature, just the sentence. A knock came at the door 2 floors down. Some delivery, not mine. The sound passed through and faded. I lifted my mug. The tea had darkened slightly, the bergamot deepening. I didn't rush to drink it. From the window, I could see the lake. The branches of the cottonwood trees had started to leaf out in uneven patches. 2 figures stood near the water, with lines cast far into the shallows. The motion was slow, patient, neither of them speaking. When I first moved in, I used to count the windows of the neighboring buildings, track which ones lit up first, which ones stayed dark. Now, I didn't bother. They weren't stories I needed to follow. Inside the drawer next to the radiator beneath the last tax return, and a small bag of thumbtacks, I had kept 1 photograph. No frame, no writing on the back. Just me in jeans and a plain t-shirt, leaning against the front of my SUV. I'd taken it on a timer just before a long drive west. My expression wasn't soft. It wasn't guarded either. I looked like someone standing where she meant to be. I chose a simple black frame, the kind sold in grocery stores near the batteries and birthday candles. I placed the photo inside, wiped the glass with the edge of my sleeve, and hung it by the door, just slightly off-center. No flowers, no plaque, no captions, just an image to meet my eye on the way out. Later, I folded the laundry that had dried overnight. The shirts were lined with faint creases from the rack. I didn't smooth them. They'd fall away on their own. At noon, I opened the mailbox and found nothing inside. No flyers, no notices, no invitations. I closed it and didn't feel the urge to check again. I remembered a voice from long ago, my father's, clipped and factual. You don't know how to be part of something permanent. He hadn't looked at me when he said it. He was staring at a spreadsheet, pointing at numbers I was no longer included in. I hadn't answered. Some sentences aren't meant to be corrected, only left behind. My mother's last message had ended with, "You're making yourself small on purpose." I'd saved that one. For a while. Then, one day, without any particular emotion, I deleted it. The air didn't shift. The room didn't change. But I noticed that I had exhaled. I received a postcard from Harper last month. No return address. Just 3 words. You look steady. That was enough. The kettle clicked off empty again. I turned the page in the notebook. No lines. Just a faint watermark, the kind that disappears when the light hits it directly. I didn't write anything more. The envelope from the shelter was still under the mug. I slid it out, folded it again, and tucked it into the back of a drawer. Not hidden, not on display. Just there. I didn't call anyone to share the news. The house didn't fill with voices. The light didn't ask for permission to come in. I took a sip of the tea. The warmth held steady in the center of the cup. No one was watching, and I didn't need them to.